Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Power relations in discourse analysis. Power relations in discourse analysis refer to the ways in which language is used to enact, maintain, challenge, and negotiate power within social interactions. Discourse is not neutral. It reflects and reinforces the power dynamics present in society. Through discourse analysis, scholars explore how power is embedded in language, how certain voices are privileged over others, and how language can both sustain and contest power structures. 1. Discourse as a medium of power. Language as a tool for exercising power. Discourse is a primary medium through which power is exercised and contested. Language can be used to assert authority, influence others, and shape social realities. Those who control discourse often hold significant power because they can shape the way people think, behave, and interact. Control over discourse. Control over what is said, how it is said, and who gets to speak reflects power relations. Institutions like the media, government, and education systems often control dominant discourses, shaping public perception and social norms. Exclusion and marginalization. Power is also exercised by excluding certain voices or perspectives from discourse. Marginalized groups may find their experiences and viewpoints underrepresented or misrepresented in dominant discourses. Example: in a corporate environment, the language of management reports and meetings often reflects the power dynamics within the organization. The use of technical jargon, formal tone, and strategic ambiguity can reinforce the authority of management and marginalize the voices of lower-level employees who may not have access to the same language resources. Point 2. Ideology and power. The role of ideology in sustaining power structures. Ideology refers to the set of beliefs, values, and norms that shape how individuals and groups perceive and interact with the world. In discourse analysis, ideology is seen as deeply intertwined with power because it legitimizes and naturalizes certain power structures. Language is a key tool for disseminating and reinforcing ideology. Naturalization of power. Dominant ideologies often become so embedded in discourse that they appear natural or inevitable. This process masks the power relations that sustain these ideologies, making them harder to challenge. Reproduction of power. Through repeated discursive practices, ideologies are reproduced across different contexts, ensuring the continuity of existing power structures. Example: media discourse often reflects and reinforces capitalist ideology by emphasizing individual success stories and downplaying structural inequalities. This naturalizes the idea that economic success is primarily a result of personal effort, rather than systemic factors, thereby supporting the existing power relations within a capitalist society. Point 3. Hegemony in discourse. Dominance through consent. Hegemony, a concept developed by the Italian Marxist theorist Antonio Gramsci, refers to the dominance of one group over others, not through force but through the widespread acceptance of its values and norms. In discourse analysis, hegemony is studied to understand how dominant groups maintain their power by shaping the discourses that others consent to. Discursive hegemony. The dominant group's worldview becomes the accepted, common sense, through discursive practices that marginalize alternative perspectives. Consent and coercion. While hegemony relies on consent, it is also reinforced by the coercive power of institutions that promote and enforce dominant discourses. Example: in education, the curriculum often reflects the hegemonic values of the dominant culture. For example, a history curriculum might prioritize Western perspectives, marginalizing other cultural narratives. Students are taught to accept these perspectives as the standard, which reinforces the dominant group's control over cultural and historical knowledge. Point 4. Power and resistance in discourse. Contesting dominant discourses. While discourse can reinforce power, it is also a site of resistance. Individuals and groups can challenge dominant discourses by creating alternative narratives, subverting established language practices, or reclaiming marginalized voices. Discourse analysis explores how power relations are not static but are constantly negotiated and contested through language. Counter-discourses. These are discourses that challenge the status quo, offering alternative ways of understanding the world. Counter-discourses can destabilize dominant ideologies by exposing their inconsistencies or highlighting marginalized perspectives. Subversion. Language can be used creatively to subvert dominant discourses, often through humor, irony, or reappropriation of terms. Example: feminist discourse often challenges traditional gender norms by subverting language that has historically been used to oppress women. For instance, the term slut has been reappropriated in certain feminist movements as a way to resist and undermine the derogatory use of the word by patriarchal discourse. 5. Discursive strategies for exerting power. Techniques for maintaining control. Discursive strategies are the specific linguistic techniques used by individuals or institutions to maintain or exert power. These strategies can include framing, agenda setting, silencing, and other rhetorical techniques that shape how discourse is produced and understood. Framing. The way issues are framed in discourse can significantly influence how they're perceived. By controlling the frame, powerful groups can control the narrative. Silencing. Power can be exerted by silencing certain voices, either through direct censorship or more subtle means like discrediting or ignoring alternative perspectives. Example: in political discourse, framing an issue like immigration as a crisis, rather than a humanitarian challenge, can influence public perception and policy. The crisis frame emphasizes urgency and threat, which can justify restrictive measures and the centralization of power. 6. Discourse and social identity. Constructing and maintaining group identities. Power relations in discourse are also reflected in the construction of social identities. Language is used to define who belongs to a group, who is excluded, and how different identities are valued. Discourse analysis examines how power shapes the construction and negotiation of identities within social interactions. In group and out-group dynamics. Discourses often construct in groups, those who belong, and out-groups, those who are excluded, reinforcing power hierarchies. Identity politics. Discursive practices can reinforce or challenge the identities imposed by dominant groups, contributing to the empowerment or marginalization of certain social identities. Example: nationalist discourse often constructs a strong sense of in-group identity by emphasizing common language, culture, and history. This can simultaneously construct an out-group of others, who are perceived as threats to national unity, reinforcing power dynamics between the dominant group and minorities. 7. Examples of power relations in various contexts. Power relations in legal discourse. Legal discourse is a clear example of how language reflects and enacts power. The law is a powerful institution, and legal language is used to define rights, responsibilities, and penalties, often reinforcing existing power structures. Legal jargon. The use of complex legal language can exclude those who are not trained in the law, reinforcing the power of legal professionals and the legal system. Judicial decisions. The way judges frame their decisions, through legal reasoning and precedent, reflects and perpetuates power relations within society. Example: the discourse used in courtrooms often privileges the voices of legal professionals over those of defendants or laypeople, reinforcing the authority of the legal system. The use of technical language and legal precedents can make it difficult for non-experts to fully participate in the legal process. Power relations in media discourse. Media discourse plays a significant role in shaping public opinion and reinforcing power dynamics. The way media outlets frame news stories, select sources, and present information can reflect and reinforce existing power relations. Agenda setting. Media outlets can exert power by deciding which issues to highlight and which to ignore, thereby shaping the public agenda. Representation. The way different social groups are represented in media can reinforce stereotypes and maintain power imbalances. Example: media coverage of protests often reflects power relations. When protests are framed as violent riots, rather than peaceful demonstrations, this can delegitimize the protesters' cause and reinforce the authority of the state or other powerful groups. Power relations in educational discourse. In educational settings, Power relations are evident in the way knowledge is constructed and transmitted. The language used in curricula, classroom interactions, and institutional policies reflects and reinforces the power dynamics within education. Curriculum design. The choice of what is included in the curriculum and how it is taught reflects the power of those who control the education system. Teacher-student interactions. The language used by teachers can either empower or disempower students, influencing their learning and self-perception. Example: a history curriculum that focuses primarily on the achievements of Western civilizations while marginalizing the contributions of other cultures reflects and reinforces the power of Western narratives in shaping historical knowledge. Power relations in corporate discourse. In the corporate world, discourse is a key tool for maintaining power structures within organizations. The language of management, corporate communications, and workplace policies reflects the power dynamics between employers and employees. Corporate speak. The use of specific corporate language, such as synergy, efficiency, or innovation, can reflect and reinforce the priorities of management, often at the expense of employee autonomy or well-being. Workplace policies. The way workplace policies are communicated can reflect power dynamics, such as the emphasis on productivity or compliance over creativity or dissent. Example: a company's internal communications that consistently emphasize alignment with corporate goals might reflect a power dynamic where employee input is valued less than adherence to management's vision. This discourse reinforces management's control over the direction of the organization. Conclusion: power relations are central to discourse analysis, revealing how language both reflects and shapes social hierarchies, ideologies, and identities. By examining how power operates through discourse in various contexts, such as legal, media, educational, and corporate settings, discourse analysts can uncover the mechanisms by which power is maintained and contested in society. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for recognizing the role of language in sustaining or challenging the status quo and for fostering more equitable social interactions. Frequently asked questions. What are power relations in discourse analysis? Power relations in discourse analysis refer to the ways in which language is used to enact, maintain, challenge, and negotiate power within social interactions. This involves examining how certain voices are privileged over others, how discourse reflects and reinforces social hierarchies, and how language can be a tool for both sustaining and contesting power structures. How does discourse serve as a medium of power? Discourse serves as a medium of power by shaping the way people think, behave, and interact. Through control over what is said, how it is said, and who gets to speak, powerful groups can influence social norms, values, and realities. Exclusion and marginalization of certain voices in discourse also reflect power dynamics, as those with control over discourse can limit the representation of alternative perspectives. What role does ideology play in power relations within discourse? Ideology plays a crucial role in sustaining power structures within discourse. It involves the set of beliefs and values that shape how individuals and groups perceive and interact with the world. Language disseminates and reinforces these ideologies, making certain power relations appear natural or inevitable. This naturalization makes it difficult to challenge the underlying power dynamics that sustain these ideologies. How does hegemony function in discourse? Hegemony in discourse refers to the dominance of one group's worldview, which becomes accepted as common sense through widespread consent. This dominance is maintained not just through coercion but by shaping discourses that marginalize alternative perspectives. Hegemonic discourses are reinforced by institutions like education, media, and government, ensuring the continuity of the dominant group's values and norms. Can discourse be a site of resistance to power? Yes, discourse can be a site of resistance to power. Individuals and groups can challenge dominant discourses by creating counter-discourses, subverting established language practices, or reclaiming marginalized voices. This resistance can destabilize existing power structures and offer new ways of understanding social realities. What are discursive strategies for exerting power? Discursive strategies for exerting power include techniques like framing, agenda setting, and silencing. These strategies shape how discourse is produced and understood, influencing public perception and reinforcing power dynamics. For example, Framing an issue in a particular way can control the narrative and marginalize alternative interpretations. How do power relations influence the construction of social identities in discourse? Power relations influence the construction of social identities by determining who belongs to certain groups, who is excluded, and how different identities are valued. Discourses often construct in groups and outgroups, reinforcing power hierarchies. The language used in these discourses can either empower or marginalize certain identities, shaping social interactions and perceptions. How are power relations reflected in legal discourse? In legal discourse, power relations are reflected in the use of complex legal language, which can exclude those who are not trained in the law, reinforcing the power of legal professionals and the legal system. Judicial decisions and legal reasoning often perpetuate existing power structures by framing legal issues in ways that reflect dominant ideologies. How do media discourses reflect and reinforce power dynamics? Media discourses reflect and reinforce power dynamics through practices like agenda setting, framing, and representation. The media's control over what issues are highlighted and how they are presented shapes public opinion and reinforces existing power relations. For example, the way social groups are represented in media can perpetuate stereotypes and maintain power imbalances. How do power relations manifest in educational discourse? In educational discourse, power relations manifest in the design of curricula, the language used in classroom interactions, and institutional policies. These discourses often reflect the values and norms of the dominant culture, marginalizing alternative perspectives. The language used by teachers can either empower or disempower students, influencing their learning and identity formation. How are power relations evident in corporate discourse? In corporate discourse, power relations are evident in the language of management, corporate communications, and workplace policies. The use of specific corporate language often reflects the priorities of management and reinforces the power dynamics between employers and employees. Workplace policies communicated through this discourse can emphasize compliance and control, shaping organizational culture and employee behavior. What is the significance of understanding power relations in discourse analysis? Understanding power relations in discourse analysis is crucial for recognizing how language sustains or challenges social hierarchies, ideologies, and identities. By examining how power operates through discourse in various contexts, such as legal, media, educational, and corporate settings, discourse analysts can uncover the mechanisms by which power is maintained and contested in society, leading to a deeper understanding of social dynamics and the potential for more equitable interactions. How can discourse analysis help in challenging power structures? Discourse analysis can help challenge power structures by revealing how language reflects and sustains these structures, offering insights into how they can be contested. By identifying and analyzing counter-discourses, subversive language practices, and the ways in which marginalized voices can be amplified, discourse analysis provides tools for resisting and reconfiguring existing power relations.